Hello and welcome to Chapter 6 of our Project Dracunalysys adventure. We'll take a look at Chapter 6 now, following on from last time. And we have Mina Murray's journal this time, 24th of July. So it cuts back here to where we had this idea of Mina is going to stay with her best friend, Lucy, and they're staying in Whitby because contextually Victorians put a lot of stock in holidaying somewhere where there's lots of fresh air, so they always thought it was really good for your health, and there's a huge industry in health tourism. So just need to get the pointer sorted out. So we have, this is a lovely place. It's very clear that Stoker is wanting us to share Mina's enthusiasm for Whitby as well. So we get this very picturesque description, very detailed description of Whitby itself. I find this interesting where we have references to Nuremberg, like the pictures we see of Nuremberg, which is in Germany, and it had a lot of medieval buildings, but Nuremberg for a modern reader has got connotations with Nazis, unfortunately, because it's where they held the rallies, it's where they had the Nuremberg trials and everything. But obviously this was written long before that, so what it's meant to suggest is it's meant to be an analogy for how picturesque the medieval town looks. I mean, obviously this isn't set in medieval times, but as in terms of a sense of history of the place, dates back to medieval times. There's a reference to a Gothic horror as well. So it's seen a part of Marmion where the girl was built up in the wall. That's a very Gothic image and is a practice that did exist in the past as a punishment for usually like nuns, and young women would sometimes happen where they'd be bricked in, into a room and just left. Then we have some more Gothic atmosphere created. There is a legend that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. So we have local legends and supernatural folklore, which fits in with the themes of the novel as well. And of course, a description of a big graveyard all full of tombstones. So again, very Gothic imagery Stoker setting up. So even though it's a lovely place, there's a lot of Gothic history, and Dracula, of course, is on his way. We know he's coming to England and this is where he's going to make landfall. Bizarrely though, Mina has, this is to my mind the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town. So she likes to sit in the graveyard, like, okay. But I think we know what we're meant to think, can't we? Then we have some local detail there, cattle nest there. Some of the graves have been destroyed, yeah, so again, a lovely place. But anyway, but you're getting a sense of history and the past here, and a sense of the Gothic coming through. I like this is this self-referential thing to, indeed I'm writing now, present continuous tense there, with my book on my knee and listening to the talk of three old men who are sitting beside me. They seem to do nothing all day but sit up here and talk. So you're almost getting like a live commentary on what's happening. So as she's writing, this is what she's experiencing and seeing and hearing. So that's what Stoker sets up, adds to the realism. There's more detail about the locale as well. And then over the page we have, again, at the end of it is a boy with a bell which swings in bad weather. So this is foreshadowing the storm that's going to approach at the end of the chapter, and sends in a mournful sound on the wind. So there's connotations of death and general gloom. They have a legend here, when a ship is lost, bells are heard out at sea. So the sea is often a great source of superstition, isn't it? And even the supernatural. So again, it's Stoker developing the Gothic themes of the novel, but at the moment it's kind of disguised as a little holiday for these two young women. Then we have references to Mr. Swales, who unfortunately is cut out of almost every adaptation. Well, I think actually every film adaptation and TV one. I can't think of one that he's actually in. But he's the classic kind of horror trope character of the old man who has all the local information and can see the danger coming, but people don't listen to. He's a bit like that, really. He's definitely signifies things to come. There's things, and then also there's other things about him as well, which I'll say in a minute. He must be awfully old, for his face is all gnarled and twisted like the bark of a tree. So a nice simile there as well. He tells me that he is nearly 100 and that he was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. So Mina meets this nice old man who is really old. But what's interesting is about Mr. Swales, and I think why Stoker's included him as well, another reason is that Mr. Swales is naturally old, where Dracula is artificially old, isn't he? He's got an extended lifespan. Dracula isn't actually very wise, even though he's old. It's taken him a long time to learn about England and to learn English itself. And even Van Helsing later on says that he's got like a child's brain. But Mr. Swales has got all that accumulated years of knowledge and wisdom naturally. And actually that's why you've got this reference to like twisted like the bark of a tree, because that's very natural imagery, isn't it, as well? So there's a sense of his age as reference to the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. So it's not an ABBA reference, but it's a reference to the Napoleonic era. That gives an idea at the start of the century about how old he is. Then I've highlighted this because of all of the dialect kind of features here. So Stoker is trying to, it's not necessarily 100% accurate, but he's trying to suggest the local dialect in Whitby as well, like the Yorkshire dialect. So he's giving a bit of, I suppose it's a bit of colour, a bit of local flavour and local colour. But you can see how sceptical he is about the supernatural. He's sceptical about all the tourists coming in, isn't he? Well, critical of that, I should say, rather. Then you got more dialect. I just highlighted that one because it was funny, really. I must gang again woods home now, miss. My granddaughter doesn't like to be kept waiting when the tea's ready, for it takes me time to cramble aboon the grease, for there be many of 'em, and miss, I lack belly timber surely by the clock. Went a bit Scottish then for a minute, but you get the idea. Then the steps are a great feature of the place. One thing you might be thinking about this is Whitby is a good question. Well, Whitby is a nice place, but why Whitby for Dracula going to Whitby? The reason is, if you've ever actually been there, you'll see that the abbey that's referred to is actually quite close to the sea. Presumably, because Dracula has to recharge his vampiric batteries and he likes to desecrate holy ground, it's easy for him. Dracula's vampires aren't particularly keen on water, like running water. Either they're not naturally something that goes with water. So you have a sense of Dracula being able to quickly move from the boat to land, and he can get somewhere to recharge his batteries. Not literally batteries, his metaphorical vampiric batteries. Then we have a nice little technique here of antonomasia. He's evidently the Sir Oracle of them. So antonomasia is when you give someone a nickname based on a characteristic that they have, and the name might be drawn from a figure from literature, history, or the Bible, or elsewhere, or anything like that. So Sir Oracle is this one. So it's kind of mildly kind of ironic, isn't it, really, because it's exaggerated. He's just one of these old men. He's very opinionated. He talks other people down. Then we have connotations of innocence for Lucy as well, sweetly pretty in her white lawn frock. So as she's sitting up here as well, more dialect. But I've highlighted this for Mr. Swales because he references like local superstitions, bogles and barguests and bogles or boggles. But these are all the different types of spirits, aren't they, as well? And I think that's a kind of ghost dog, actually. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that is. Then we have references to about all the tombstones and the wisdom of Mr. Swales. He's old enough to know that actually a lot of the comments on the tombstones aren't actually true. They're kind of dressing up the reality of the dead. But really a lot of this, because there's references here to like the day of judgment and the dead rising and the dead walking. And he's saying, well, there's going to be a lot of disappointment when the dead are walking at the day of judgment, and then the tombstones prove that they say one thing, but the actual reality is they didn't actually do the things that the tombstones claim they did. But of course, this is foreshadowing the arrival of Dracula himself, isn't it? Who is the walking dead. So it's ironic kind of foreshadowing here. And there's still more dialect words in that section. I haven't highlighted too much on here because a lot of it repeats the same kind of ideas. Then, again, I went for this bit. Do you think that all these men will have to make a rush to Whitby when the trumpet sounds? He knows a lot of these men aren't actually buried in these graves, but they've actually died somewhere out at sea. But again, it's another bit of ironic foreshadowing because the dead, as in Dracula, the undead, is making a rush to Whitby, but it's not on the day of judgment. It's right now because he's the undead and he's the living dead and he's on his way. Then we have more of Mr. Swales' wisdom because he knows about what's on the gravestone is actually different to the reality of what he knows actually happened. So there's a tragic case of a suicide where basically a son was effectively took his own life to stop the mother he hated from gaining the insurance policy she'd put on his life. So there's an ironic, dark backstory there to that. And again, it's the wisdom of Mr. Swales as well. And we have references to Jonathan Harker as well. And we also have a reference to Lucy going to get married to Arthur as well. So we have a reminder about Jonathan as well. There was no letter for me. I hope there cannot be anything the matter with Jonathan. More dramatic irony because obviously we know he's been in danger and it was left on the cliffhanger of him escaping from the castle. I wonder where Jonathan is and if he is thinking of me. I wish he were here. So then we have the action shifts to Dr. Seward's diary, so 5th of June, and he continues after the last chapter with his description of Renfield. We're finding more and more about this intriguing character. We know later on, we can see now, if you know the whole novel, you can see why the previous section just ended with Mina's references to Jonathan and where he is, and obviously he's been suffering at the hands of Dracula. Now it shifts to Dr. Seward talking about this fascinating patient who we know is actually linked to Dracula, and you can see how those two kind of work as parallels. It's less obvious the first time you read it, but it's intriguing for the reader to wonder what is the actual matter with Renfield, what's happening. So this is a great bit. It reminds me of the old nursery rhyme of the old lady who swallowed a fly. It's a little bit like that, but darker, even though that is a weird nursery rhyme. So we have reference to Renfield as being intriguing because he's got this, is described as his redeeming quality is a love of animals, but his love is actually much weirder than that. Just now his hobby is catching flies. So that sounds a bit unusual, doesn't it, as well? So Dr. Seward asks him to remove the flies, and much to Dr. Seward's surprise, he's surprised to hear from Renfield that, yeah, give me 3 days and I'll get rid of them. But actually, this is one of those things where there is method in his madness, where we're seeing his mind now turn to spiders. And he's got several very big fellows in a box. He keeps feeding them with his flies, and the number of the latter is becoming sensibly diminished, although he's used half his food and attracting more flies from outside to his room. So it's a bit like, yeah, there was an old lady who swallowed a fly and then she's catching a spider. So he's going up in animals. So you've got a technique here, incrementum. There is a sense of build-up because these animals are getting bigger. So the spiders become a nuisance as the flies, and then he's told to get rid of them, and then he goes through the same thing. While Seward is talking to him, for when a horrid blowfly bloated with some carrion food, that's obviously a deliberate reference to that's something that feeds on the dead and death, isn't it? A horrid blowfly bloated with some carrion food buzzed into the room. He caught it, held it exultantly for a few moments between his finger and thumb, and before I knew what he was going to do, put it in his mouth and ate it. So it's obviously meant to be deliberately disgusting, an image from Stoker there, but again, you're seeing the peculiar nature of Renfield and what he's doing, and he's eating these small lives. Then, interestingly as well, whole pages of it are filled. This is his notebook that he's filling in. He evidently has some deep problem in his mind. So he's got this notebook. Whole pages of it are filled with masses of figures, generally single numbers added up in batches, when the totals added in batches again, as though he were focusing some account, as the auditors put it. A couple of things going on here with this. One, it hints maybe that Renfield's actual background was maybe an accountant, and that's how he ended up coming into contact with Dracula, and that's how he's ended up under Dracula's control, possibly. It's very, very mild hint there, isn't it, as well? It also reminded me of ideas about numerology and the significance of numbers, and there's a supernatural quality associated with certain numbers, and a lot of that is sometimes drawn from biblical sources, but you also have it in outside of the Bible as well, like the idea of numbers appearing in nature and using numbers as part of like the occult. And there's even those numbers stations, aren't there, what you hear about, like the urban legends of those stations and what are the purpose of those, that those radio stations transmit it. Obviously that's not directly relevant for this, but you know what it means. You know what I mean? It reminds me of there's a kind of supernatural, mysterious quality about numbers without any context, and that's what Stoker's drawing on here. There is a method in his madness. That's actually a Shakespeare reference, and it's a phrase that is used in everyday life anyway as an idiom. And so he's got a logic. So he goes up to sparrows. So again, there's this sense of income, like the build up from flies to spiders to sparrows. My friend has a whole colony of sparrows. That's ironic, as my friend, and his flies and spiders almost obliterated. Ironically, that he spoke and fawned on me like a dog. Stoker uses that simile there, so drawing on more animal connotations. So first of all, he wants a kitten, a nice little sleek, playful kitten that I can play with and teach and feed and feed and feed. So there's some parallel phrasing there as well. But the feed, it's polysemic, because it would appear to Dr. Seward that he means to look after the cat. But even though, well, it's meant to appear to Dr. Seward, it means like looking after and feeding the cat. But actually, it's the other meaning of it is to feed on the cat, is what he's hoping to, or kitten at this point. But he does actually want a cat. So it actually goes from spiders, flies, sparrows, kitten, and cat. But he doesn't actually get the kitten and the cat. But there is a sense of he's trying to build up in size of creature that he's killing and consuming. The man is an undeveloped homicidal maniac. That's Renfield's appraisal of him as well. He implored me to let him have a cat that his salvation depended upon it. And salvation is again, that's ironic, because this is all associated with Dracula and vampirism. Then we have some more grotesque descriptions here. There are a few feathers about the room, and on his pillow a drop of blood. I said nothing, but went and told the keeper to report to me if there were anything odd about him during the day. And oh yeah, 11 a.m. We certainly get that. The attendant has just been to me to say that Renfield has been very sick and has disgorged a whole lot of feathers. My belief is, Doctor, he said, that he has eaten his birds and that he just took and ate them raw. So it reminds me of the cartoons you'd see where there's Sylvester the cat and they or Tom and Jerry, and the cough and the feathers would pop out of their mouth. You know, it's that. It reminds you of that kind of image. Obviously, Stoker's not drawing on that, but he's consuming these birds and eating them in a way that's abhorrent to the standards and conventions of Victorian Western society. The great term to describe Renfield as zoophagous, and it's even glossed for us as it's explained in brackets here in parentheses. Life-eating maniac. He desires to absorb as many lives as he can, and he has laid himself out to achieve it in a cumulative way. So presumably this is what his ledger's associated with as well. He gave many flies to one spider and many spiders to one bird, and wanted a cat to eat the many birds. What would have been his later steps? So I didn't highlight this bit, but it's really interesting anyway. So yeah, you can still highlight it yourselves or just make note of it. So there's a sense of he's trying to build up lives upon lives. He's trying to make a kind of cumulative effect of building up more and more life to consume, because he wants to empower himself. Interestingly, Stoker deliberately juxtaposes this with maybe not Renfield, Seward trying to empower his own self, because had I the secret of one such mind, did I hold the key to the fancy of even one lunatic, I might advance my own branch of science to a pitch compared with that with which Bird and Sanderson's physiology or Ferrier's brain knowledge would be as nothing. So there's actually a bit of a vain thing going on here, where Dr. Seward is so interested in Renfield, but he has a professional interest and he wants to, in theory, if he can work out what makes Renfield tick, then he can be a highly recognised scientist in terms of psychology himself and advance his own career effectively. So interesting parallel between him and Renfield there, isn't it? I wonder how many lives he values a man, or if only one. So this is really, the implication is this is what Renfield is building up to. Then there's a bit of a shift in terms of tone, because it goes from Seward focusing on Renfield to then reflecting on his own sadness at the loss of not being able to marry Lee. So he's a bit lovesick. I must only wait on hopeless and work, anadiplosis there. And even, you could even say epizeuxis as well. Then we have more dramatic irony. I had not heard from Jonathan some time, was very concerned. But yesterday, dear Mr. Hawkins, who was always so kind, sent me a letter from him. So we had one of these other fake letters that, well, they're not fake, but I suppose the coerced letters that Dracula made Harker write, they're now appearing later on. And so there's still suspense. Stoker is still managing to sustain suspense about what's happened to Jonathan Harker. Then we have references to sleepwalking, which Victorians were really interested in as a contextual point. And you can talk about somnambulism, which is a great word. But walking in his sleep, and that's a great example of liminality as well. Loads of examples of liminality in the novel where there's things between spaces. So sleepwalking is between being awake and being asleep, isn't it? So that's a great example of a liminal space. Victorians go, Mrs. Westenra has got an idea that sleepwalkers always go out of roofs and houses along the edge of cliffs and then suddenly get weakened all over with a despairing cry that echoes all over the place. There was a fear that sleepwalkers could, in Victorian times, there was a fear that sleepwalkers could get themselves into physical trouble and like fall off a cliff or something when they're walking along half asleep. Reference to Mr. Homewood, which is Arthur. He was the Honourable Arthur Homewood, only son of Lord Godalming, which is just an interesting reference just for later on, really. I thought I'd highlight here. I haven't got any big analysis about it, but apart from contextually, a lot of stock in social class in Victorian times as well. Then over the page, we've still got concern about Jonathan, but I highlighted this because this is actually going to prove ironic, because at the moment Lucy is very healthy. She has lost that anemic look which she had. I pray it will all last. So Lucy's looking very well at the moment, and that's ironic because it's not actually going to last, if you know what's going to happen after this. Then, in terms, again, more foreshadowing of future events, we've got this terrible storm coming in. All is vastness, the clouds are piled up like giant rocks, so similarly there, and there is a brawl over the sea that sounds like some presage of doom. Dark figures are on the beach here and there, sometimes half shrouded in the mist, and seem like men walking. So there's... Oh, something went wrong with my record. Hopefully that still worked. Then that's actually a biblical reference, but it also works as a reference to Macbeth as well, doesn't it? If you know Macbeth, which has got supernatural elements in it too. But again, dark figures on the beach here. Well, they're not actually supernatural, but it's suggesting the supernatural. And Dracula is on Mina's diary. If I didn't, so danger is approaching. So the storm, Dracula is bringing the terrible weather with him. Then we have sort of regret expressed by Mr. Swales for feeling like he's been disrespecting the dead, as he's wisdom, as Stoker's writing this, the wisdom of Mr. Swales is coming through. He knows his death is near, even though he's very old anyway. So you might think he's always thinking that, but not really. Apparently, people who are really old don't think like that. Oh, I wonder if I'm going to die today. They don't think like that. They just get on with their day, you know. So, but he's getting a sense of death is approaching. Then my time must be nigh at hand now, for I be old, and 100 years is too much for any man to expect, which is a nice counterpoint to Dracula's artificially extended lifespan, isn't it, as well? But look at the wisdom of Mr. Swales. There's something in that wind and in the horse beyond that sounds and looks and tastes and smells like death. It's in the air, I feel it coming. So you've got that sense of foreboding, gothic horror, pathetic fallacy with the terrible weather. It's Dracula is bringing the bad weather with him. It's meant to be one of his powers, actually, is controlling the weather. Like, he doesn't make a nice sunny day for a wedding or anything like that. He's too mean for that. He will make storms and things. That is another one of his powers. It's one of his less famous powers. I was glad when the Coast Guard came along with his spyglass, that's his telescope, under his arm. He stopped to talk to me, as he always does. So this is back to, I should have said this is Mina's. Did I say it anyway? You know. Then he kept looking at a ship. Now, this is the one that Dracula is on. I can't make her out. He said, she's a Russian by the look of her. Actually, I'm going to do a voice for him. I can't make her out. He said, she's a Russian by the look of her, but she's knocking him out in the queerest way. She doesn't know her mind a bit. She seems to see the storm coming, but can't decide whether to run up north in the open or to put in here. Look there again. She's steered mighty strangely, for she doesn't mind the hand on the wheel. Changes about with every puff of wind. We'll hear more of this time tomorrow. And so more foreshadowing, because obviously they do, and we will find out about the storm in the next chapter. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to that and you found it useful, and watch the other videos and like and subscribe and comment and all these good things that people do. Thank you very much. Farewell.